Hello and welcome. Welcome back to the studios of Extreme Agile Radio. It is here on Extreme Agile Radio that you're going to hear about this new area that we're looking at in Scrum, and that has been titled by Jeff Sutherland as Extreme Agile. And what we're looking at is we're looking at the next level up for Scrum. We've basically hit the wall with Scrum. So now we're taking it to the next level, and that is Extreme Agile. And that is where we now partner with AI. So this is the first in our new series. Each series comes from one of our lessons that we have, and we talk about that later in the podcast. But this particular lesson is titled The Rise of Scrum. And this is where you have to understand this foundation that we have, why Scrum became the top particular framework that we have in the Scrum arena globally. So we talk about that. So this particular episode that we are now starting is titled Why Software Teams Needed a Better Way to Work. So we'll talk through that here in this particular episode. And then at the end, we will introduce you to where you can actually get more information if you so desire. So with that, thank you so much. We are doing this one from our studios, and we're now going to move into our podcast studio to do the podcast. We'll see you there.
Welcome to Extreme Agile Radio, where we unveil the high-speed future of software development. Our podcast series titled Extreme Agile, the Future of Software Development, will consist of a number of podcasts and episodes. In these, we will drill down into the use of agentic AI in improving the productivity of Scrum teams, as strategized by the co-founder of the Agile framework Scrum, by up to 30 times faster results. So, buckle your seatbelts as we travel along this amazing and eye-opening journey, because you are in for the ride of your life.
Picture this. You've just spent 18 months building a software system. 18 months. Your team followed the plan perfectly, every requirement documented, every milestone hit on schedule. And then, launch day arrives. The customer looks at what you've built and says, "This isn't what we need anymore." Not because you did anything wrong, because the world changed while you were building. Hi everyone, I'm Leora Blake, and for years I've been moderating conversations about how software teams work. Today, we're starting a 6-part journey, exploring something that's about to change everything we know about team productivity. It's called Extreme Agile. But before we talk about where we're going, we need to understand where we've been. Because what's happening right now with artificial intelligence, it's eerily similar to what happened 25 years ago when software teams said enough to the old way of working. Joining me is Ed Rubilak, founder and CEO of the Agile Learning Mastery Academy and the Ed Rubilak Agile Transformation Specialist Group. Ed's been in the trenches for over 40 years, and he actually lived through the era we're going to talk about today. Ed, welcome.
Hi, Leora. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here, and I'm excited to chat. And yes, have I got some stories to tell?
Absolutely. I'm counting on it. Okay, let's start with a bit of history. I think many of us can recall, perhaps with a bit of a shiver, the ways we used to manage software projects before Agile was a thing, particularly the infamous waterfall methodology.
Oh, yes, the waterfall methodology. It was quite the regimented approach, wasn't it? Characterized by a linear and sequential design process, it required teams to complete each stage before moving on to the next. It was like building a house where you couldn't start the wiring until the drywall was up, and often by the time you handed the product to the customer, their needs had already evolved. And imagine this about that house you're building. Before you can even pour the foundation, you have to write a 300-page document describing every single room, every fixture, every paint color. And once that document is approved, which takes months, by the way, you can't change anything without going back through the entire approval process.
Even if you realize halfway through that the family needs a home office instead of a formal dining room,
Even then, actually, especially then, because the process we used, we called it waterfall. It was designed like a manufacturing assembly line. You do the requirements, then design, then coding, then testing. Each phase must be completed before the next one starts. And then, if you discover things that need to be changed late in the process, it is impossible if you need to maintain your timeline and budget. It's like a real waterfall. Water does not go back up that waterfall. It only goes one way. That's why we call it waterfall. One way only.
exactly. And that sounds orderly. Why didn't it work? I believe that the key issue with waterfall was, and by the way, still is, its lack of adaptability. I remember reading about a project where a team spent 18 months developing a CRM system, only for the customer to announce on launch day that their organizational strategy had shifted during development. By then, the system was almost obsolete.
And that's a classic example. The waterfall method's rigidity for any software project meant teams couldn't quickly adapt to new requirements or market shifts. And why, you ask? Because software isn't a car on an assembly line. A car's design doesn't change while you're building it, but software, the market changes, technology changes, customer needs change. And in waterfall, we had no way to handle that reality. This is where the need for a new methodology became evident, leading to the birth of Agile in 2001. The Agile Manifesto introduced principles that were revolutionary at the time, prioritizing individuals and interactions over processes and tools, responding to change over following a plan, using working software over comprehensive documentation to measure progress, and finally, valuing customer collaboration over contract negotiation. Seems quite simple now, right? But it was a radical change in 2001. Let me tell you about a project I worked on in 1999.
Please do.
We were building a customer relationship management system for a telecommunications company. A big project, about 40 people, 18-month timeline. We spent the first 6 months just on requirements and design documents.
6 months of documentation?
Yes, no code, just Word documents and Visio diagrams. And here's the thing. We all knew we were making assumptions. We knew we didn't fully understand what the customers would actually need, but the process said define everything up front. So we did. We got sign-off from the executives. We started coding in month 7, and by month 12, the company got acquired. The new parent company had a completely different CRM strategy. We'd spent a year building something that would never see the light of day. And the worst part? We knew it was the wrong direction by month 9, but we were locked in. The project plan said we couldn't stop and reassess until we hit certain milestones.
That's not just inefficient. That's broken.
It was broken. And Leora, this wasn't unusual. This was normal. Studies from that era showed that most large software projects were late, over budget, or delivered something the customer didn't actually want. Some projects just never finished.
So, it would seem that teams were stuck in this broken system. What changed?
February 2001, Snowbird, Utah. 17 software developers met at a ski resort, though I don't think they did much skiing.
They had work to do.
They had a revolution to start. These were people who'd all been experimenting with different approaches. They'd all seen the waterfall disasters, and they came together to ask, what if we completely rethink how we build software? Out of that meeting came something called the Agile Manifesto.
And for people who've never read it, what did it actually say?
It wasn't a process. It wasn't a set of rules. It was a declaration of values. 4 of them. Things like individuals and interactions over processes and tools. And here's the one that really challenged everything we thought we knew. Responding to change over following a plan.
When you say that, Information practitioners automatically respond with, wait, over following a plan? But isn't planning important?
See. That's the brilliance of how they worded it. They didn't say instead of, they said over. Meaning, yes, plans are valuable, but when reality changes, and it will change, your ability to respond matters more than your ability to stick to a plan that's now obsolete.
If you ask me, I would say that what you are saying is a pretty radical shift.
It was heretical at the time. Project managers had built entire careers on creating detailed plans and tracking variance from those plans. And here come these developers saying, the plan isn't the point, delivering value is the point.
Okay, so they published this manifesto. But a manifesto is a philosophy, right? How do you actually do Agile?
That's exactly the question teams asked. And that's where frameworks came in. After the manifesto, several approaches emerged, each trying to put these values into practice. There was extreme programming, or XP, which was super focused on engineering practices, pair programming, test-driven development, continuous integration. Great stuff, but it didn't really address the broader organizational challenges. Then you had Kanban, which came from Toyota's manufacturing floors. It used visual boards to show work flowing through stages. Simple, flexible, but maybe too flexible for teams that needed more structure.
What else was out there?
Oh, there was Crystal, DSDM, feature-driven development, and a number of other really good Agile frameworks. Each had champions, each had strengths, but each also had limitations. Some were too complex to learn. Others were too specialized. Teams were drowning in choices.
So what did teams actually need?
They needed something that was simple enough to learn in a day, but powerful enough for real projects. They needed predictable rhythms, regular checkpoints, but not rigid rules. They needed guidance without bureaucracy. And one framework managed to hit that sweet spot better than all the others.
Scrum.
Scrum, which, funny enough, had actually been around since the early 1990s. Jeff Sutherland created it at a company called Easel Corporation in 1993. But when Agile exploded after 2001, Scrum just took off.
Why did Scrum win? I mean, you said there were all these options. What made Scrum the one?
That's a great question, and it's actually what we're going to dive deep into in our next episode. But the short answer, Scrum gave teams just enough structure to coordinate effectively, but enough flexibility to adapt to their specific context. It had these clear roles: product owner, Scrum master, developers. It had regular ceremonies, planning, daily stand-ups, reviews, retrospectives. It had this concept of working in short cycles called sprints.
And that was enough?
It was enough to get started, and it was simple enough that teams could actually adopt it without hiring an army of consultants. You could read the Scrum Guide, which is only about 13 pages, and have a pretty good understanding of what to do. However, the Scrum team has now created what they call an extension guide. This is updated every 4 months or so, and that is where we see the inclusion now of AI. It is up to a 30-plus page count. However, the Scrum Guide 2020 is the core, and that is not changing for now.
But presumably, there were still challenges.
Oh, absolutely. Even today, studies show that about 58% of Scrum teams struggle. They're late, over budget, customers aren't happy, which tells us that having a framework isn't enough. You need to really understand it, and you need to keep evolving, which brings us to why we're having this conversation right now.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm following the timeline here. The Agile Manifesto was 2001. Scrum became the dominant framework throughout the 2000s and 2010s. So why are we talking about another evolution now?
Because we're standing at another inflection point. Just like in 2001, there's a fundamental shift happening in how teams can work. Except this time, it's not about changing our philosophy. The agile values still hold. It's about amplifying what teams can accomplish.
And that amplification comes from artificial intelligence.
It does. And before anyone panics, this isn't about AI replacing developers. It's about AI becoming a member of the team, a fourth role alongside product owner, scrum master, and developers.
That sounds ambitious.
Here's what's possible, Leora. Remember, I mentioned that Scrum, when done well, was about 10 times faster than traditional waterfall development?
Right.
When you integrate AI thoughtfully into a Scrum team, we're talking about another order of magnitude improvement. Teams that are already doing Scrum well could potentially see something like a 30 times productivity increase compared to old school waterfall.
30 times?
30 times. Now, that's not automatic. It's not magic. It requires understanding both Scrum and how to work alongside AI. But the potential is real.
Okay, so help me understand this parallel you're drawing. In 2001, we had teams stuck in waterfall who needed Agile. In 2025, we have teams doing Scrum who need what? What's the problem that Extreme Agile solves?
The problem is this. Even high-performing Scrum teams spend enormous amounts of time on repetitive work, writing user stories, creating test cases, documenting decisions, researching solutions. That work is necessary, but it's not where human creativity adds the most value. What if AI could handle that repetitive work, but do it in a way that's aligned with Scrum principles? What if your AI teammate could draft user stories in seconds, generate comprehensive test suites, analyze patterns in your backlog, function as a junior pair programmer, even help with architecture decisions?
Then the humans could focus on the strategic, creative work.
Exactly. The product owner spends more time understanding customers and less time writing tickets. Developers spend more time solving interesting problems and less time on boilerplate code. The Scrum Master focuses on team dynamics and organizational impediments instead of administrative coordination.
It's not replacing Scrum. It's supercharging it.
That's Extreme Agile. And the reason it matters now, the reason this is the perfect moment, is because the AI technology has finally caught up to what we need.
So we've established that software teams were broken before Agile, that Scrum emerged as the solution, and that we're now at another turning point with AI. But I have to ask, you mentioned there were multiple frameworks competing after the manifesto: XP, Kanban, Crystal, and others. But Scrum won. Why? What made Scrum different?
That's exactly what we're going to unpack in our next conversation. Because Scrum didn't win by accident. There are 3 very specific reasons it became the world's most popular Agile framework. And understanding those reasons is critical. Because they're the same reasons Scrum is the perfect foundation for what's coming next.
Can you give us a hint? Just one of the 3?
Okay, here's a hint. One of the reasons has to do with balance. Scrum found a balance that no other framework quite achieved. But what balance specifically? That's what we'll explore next time.
And this ties into the 30 times productivity increase you mentioned?
It does. See, to understand how Extreme Agile is even possible, you first need to understand what made Scrum so powerful in the first place. What are the building blocks? What principles can't be compromised? What can be amplified with AI? That's our next episode, The 3 Reasons Scrum Won the Agile Wars.
That should be a good one. I understand your 2 senior analysts, Alex and Melissa, may end up with a deep dive on that one. Ed, thank you so much for this conversation. For folks listening, you can find all the episodes in this series, plus resources from the Agile Learning Mastery Academy at agilelearningmastery.com or at i-am-agile.com. Next time, we're diving into why Scrum became the dominant framework and why that matters for the AI revolution happening right now. I'm Leora Blake. Thanks for listening.
If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe and share it with your team, because the journey toward Extreme Agile is just beginning. Remember, Extreme Agile isn't the future of work. It's happening right now for those ready to move faster and smarter. Join us next time on Extreme Agile Radio for more of our upcoming episodes, where we progressively dive into this exciting new innovation that is coming to the Agile framework Scrum. The innovation that the amazing Scrum co-founder Jeff Sutherland has labeled Extreme Agile, the next level up for Scrum, the addition of AI as the newest Scrum team member. Keep listening as we add more and more podcasts. Thanks for listening to this one. I'm James, reminding you to keep inspecting, keep adapting, and don't wait for 2030 to start your transformation.
Thank you very much for spending time with us in this particular podcast. I'm hoping that you did get some value from it. I know a lot of people have commented that they have, so that's wonderful, and I'm hoping that you feel the same way. Now, what we're going to do is move on to our next podcast, which will be what we call the 3 reasons Scrum won the Agile Wars. And who we'll have is we'll have Melissa and we'll have Alex doing a deep dive on that one. So get ready, be prepared, and go into that next podcast and enjoy. We will see you on Extreme Agile Radio. Thank you.